It's time to do one of my favorite chants. Skull, skull, skull. What is coolin' though? What's going on? We have the Minnesota Vikings today, Skull Nation. We're going to be looking at this roster, talk about what they need to do this offseason. It was a great season until the very end, and a little bit of disappointment, bit of heartbreak. With that all being said, though, let's get into this roster, talk about the strengths and the weaknesses, what they need to address, get into a free agency strategy, and then a mock draft. Let's start with the offensive line and the tackle room, where you got some of the best tackles in the NFL here, at least one of the best pairings with Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw. Injury struck, though. Christian Darrisaw out for the year. When he comes back, though, it'll be a huge boost to this offensive line because when he went down, their offensive line went down. So just getting him back next season is going to be a major add to this offensive line. Him healthy on this group is a huge deal. Now, the big question for me is not do they need a starter, but the thing is they are going to need a swing tackle. Quisenberry's a free agent. Robinson, I expect to go somewhere else to be a full-time starter, or at least have the chance to be a full-time starter. So that would be my thing here. You got some youth in Walter Roos, Taylor Reed, Leroy Watson. Maybe one of those guys can be a nice solid swing tackle for them. However, and I'm okay bringing back Quisenberry. He's a solid veteran that you can keep around on the cheap. So if they want to bring him back and roll with that, I'm not overly concerned about this. But no matter what, just find a swing tackle for injuries or if Darrisaw needs a little bit of time. Brian O'Neill's still under contract for 2 more years. So they're in a pretty good spot here. This is not really a huge draft need. Unlike the tackle room, the interior of the offensive line is a huge need. And especially down the stretch, this was losing them games. And I know Sam Darnold had a rough end of the season and playoff game, but the interior of the offense line did him no favors. So this is going to be an area that I'm going to be focusing in on heavily in free agency and maybe even the draft. And while Dalton Risner is the only free agent of the starters, you could really upgrade anywhere on this interior of the offense line, being reasonable. Blake Brendel is under contract for 1 more year. Ideally, he's more of a swing guard. I mean, he was good at the beginning of the season, especially with Darrisaw out there. But I'm not ready to rely on him as a full-time starter next year. Like I talked about, if he's a depth guy, I feel great about that. And he's certainly somebody that I feel he should stay on the roster still. But like I talked about, ideally, we can find an upgrade here, or at least somebody we feel good about that can be some solid competition in the room. Garrett Bradbury is under contract for 1 more season. I'm okay just letting him play out the rest of his contract. He's not super expensive on the cap. He's not an elite center, but he's not a terrible center. He still gets pushed back in pass protection. He's not the strongest guy. He's more of a, on the move, run blocking athletic guy. Dalton Risner, kind of the opposite, more of your pass protector, struggles in the run game to get a whole ton of push. Ed Ingram is a much better run blocker, but he's just a reliability. He's not a reliability as a pass protector. So that is really a problem with his game. He still hasn't been able to develop in that department. So I'm going to be looking at upgrading this interior between the draft, free agency. You better believe this is a huge area to look out for. I do want to point out Michael Juergens. I liked him coming out of Wake Forest. Keep an eye on him. Maybe he's a guy that at least has a chance to be a starting center or guard. He has versatility to play guard center. He pretty much played every spot at Wake Forest on that interior for them. So he's a guy to watch out for. We'll see if he ends up being a starter down the line, but he's definitely somebody to keep in mind for this offensive line. Let's go into the tight end room, and this team does use a lot of 11 personnel, so maybe they don't necessarily need a ton of depth at the tight end position, which is why they only got 3 guys here in Hockenson, Oliver, and Munt. And they're fine. They really are in a good position. Oliver's a great blocker, and he's been a solid receiving threat for them, especially when the Hockenson was out earlier in the season. Hockenson getting back, though, definitely was a huge boost for Sam Darnold in this offense. I mean, him and Kirk Cousins had a great chemistry, and I also feel like Sam Darnold was clicking with him as the season progressed and whatnot, Hockenson getting fully healthy. And I expect him, when he gets another full season of healthy and that full recovery, he'll be a better blocker, too, next year, because I do think he took a bit of a step back this year as a blocker. However, in general, Oliver and Hockenson both under contract. This is not a huge need. I'm okay if they brought back Johnny Munn. I think he's a solid number 3 tight end. They could also probably go a little cheaper out there on the open market to get a number 3 guy. It's not a high priority. We just need a little bit of depth in this tight end room. You got your 1-2 punch in this tight end position. So in terms of huge need, no, it's not a huge need for them. It's just a little bit of depth. Let's go on to the wide receiving room. And this is also an area that is not a huge need in terms of free agency in my eyes. Probably gonna need a little bit of depth because Trent Sherfield and Brendan Powell are both free agents. So maybe bring in a veteran. Overall, like you've got your starters with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, your 1-2 punch, your elite 1-2 punch, probably one of the best receiving cores in the NFL in terms of youth to talent right now in the NFL up there with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and those type of receivers. They are a very good pairing. Jordan Addison, I thought, took another step. I know his stats weren't as good maybe as I don't think he was has much receiving yards as he was last year. He did miss a couple of games, but I thought he was even more explosive this year, making more plays down the field. I was really impressed with Jordan Addison this year, and he's becoming a star player for sure, or he already is a star player anyway. Justin Jefferson, we all know, is the number one receiver, so we don't need to talk about that all the time, Jettas. Jalen Naylor, solid number 3 wide receiver. Could you upgrade there? Absolutely. And that's what I would say. Maybe it's a late 5th round. They've got 2 5th-round picks. You could use one of those picks on that because Naylor is going into a contract year. I believe it'll be a restricted. Their depth is a little thin, and that would be my one argument here. Addison, Jefferson are the only guys currently under contract until 2026. So that's why I'm saying you could probably spend a draft pick on it, like a 5th round or at least a UDFA, get some more UDFAs in there to compete for the roster spot. The running back position now, and you got some really good solid 1-2 punch with Akers and Jones. Aaron Jones is still very, very good, even though he's, 30 years old now. Still one of the better running backs in the NFL. Only thing I will say, he had some fumble issues this year. I think he wore down a little bit as the season progressed. Just the wear and tear. I could talk about it. He's getting a little bit older now. You can't expect Aaron Jones to be the workhorse, and I'm totally fine with that. I would recommend trying to bring back Aaron Jones and Cam Akers. Akers looked pretty dang good down the stretch, especially for them after getting him into trade. So I would recommend keeping Akers and Jones if you can, but I would still look at drafting somebody here. You need to add depth, at least somebody in here that can compete with those guys and hopefully give them an engine to go along with this and just bolster this running back room so that way they can keep Aaron Jones fresh, keep Cam Akers fresh, all those guys, keep a nice rotation. It's really important in a running back room. I wouldn't say this is a first-round need, though. I would not be, unless Ashton Genty's on the board, I'm not selecting a running back in the first round. Now, let's go on to the quarterback talk here, and it starts with Sam Darnold. And I want to say this first and foremost. I know Sam Darnold's going to get a lot of hate because the way he ended the season versus the Rams and the Lions, it wasn't all on him. As I talked about earlier with that interior of the offensive line and the offensive tackle, even with Cam Robinson struggling at the end of the season, there were some issues going on there, and it's tough. And he was probably seeing some ghosts again. As a Jets fan, I know all about that. But you have to give credit where credit is due. Sam Darnold took major strides. He limited some of those bad decision-making hero ball tendencies that he's been so prone to with the Jets over his career. And I'm really happy of Sam Darnold. I think he deserves a lot of credit, and I hope wherever he ends up going that he just continues to grow and gets better and better and ends up being a franchise quarterback for somebody, because I'm really was hoping Sam Darnold could prove the Jets wrong. I was really sad to see Sam Darnold go. And the Jets are the Jets, so hopefully we got a new situation with Aaron Glenn going on there. But going back to Sam Darnold, wish him the best. What I would do here, though, is if I had to choose, I would bring back Daniel Jones. I think they can get him in here on the cheap. They traded for or picked him up off the waivers, and now you can bring him in on kind of bridge situation, just like Sam Darnold. Kevin O'Connell is one of the best offensive minds in the game, deserving that extension. And you keep him to be that bridge quarterback for J.J. McCarthy. That way McCarthy doesn't have to start right away coming off that injury. So I think that would really be the best case scenario. Now, look, if J.J. McCarthy ends up winning the job in training camp and looks great, I'm all for it. I have no problem paying Daniel Jones a bridge contract just for him to come in there and help out and give you competition with J.J. McCarthy. I want to make sure, though, that we're not rushing J.J. McCarthy into the fold, that we don't have to with coming back from that injury. So that's why I do think it's important to bring back one of these guys, and I think Daniel Jones would make the more sense to do that. Maybe bring back Nick Mullins, too. He's a solid player. Anyway, Daniel Jones, I would certainly try to bring him back on a relatively cheap one-year prove-it situation, and that allows him to be a win-win scenario. Let's go on to the defense and start with the interior of the defensive line now, and this interior's got some really good run defenders. Jonathan Bullard and Harrison Phillips, very, very good run defenders. Jalen Redmond also stepping his game up this season and looked really good, making plays in the run game consistently. So between those three guys, you have some nice run defenders. It's who's the pass rusher? Who's that 3 tech in the room? Jihad Ward's a nice rotational player, gives you inside-out versatility. Jerry Tillery, definitely a disappointment. I did not see him a whole ton. He made a couple of plays here and there. In general, they need to add a nice 3 tech. That is a huge need for this team. Whether it's a free agent like Osa Digizua, Milton Williams, or a draft pick, they need to address this position. And especially with this interior defensive line class, a Walter Nolan, a Derek Harmon, those are guys that I think 3 techs for this team, they could be really, really good targets for where they're picking at 24 that they can go out in that first round selection and go out and get. Those will be targets. So between free agency and the draft, they've got some real good options to be able to address that 3-tech role. I do know that Brian Flores, the interior guys, they're more run defenders. He likes to get mismatches too. They like to do a lot of stunts and gains, blitzes, and things like that. So it is not as huge of a priority, but I think having a really good 3-tech will make Brian Flores' defense work even really better. So that's if that's even a phrase. Anyway, that is something that I'm going to be really prioritizing for this team this offseason between free agency and the draft, is finding somebody that can be a more consistent nuance pressure package machine on the interior of the defensive line. To the edge room, and you got a pair of studs. How would you feel him for losing Danielle Hunter? Just fine. You got Jonathan Grenard, who's been a stud, all-pro level this season. Andrew Van Ginkel, AVG. He's not just good in pass rush, man. He can get after the. We better watch out, quarterbacks. The dude makes interceptions. I think both of his interceptions too are pick sixes this year. Anyway, they got some studs off the edge. Dallas Turner continuing to come along as a pass rusher. I want to see him come along a little bit more, but we knew he was a raw prospect coming out, and I expect him to be year 3 guy. Really is where we want to see Dallas Turner. So much athleticism, so much upside. He's just a little bit raw in terms of using his pass rush plan and tools. Expect him to get better and better. Pat Jones, nice, reliable number 3 guy for this team, and somebody that also was getting some pressure off the quarterback and being able to use him as a rotational guy with Grenard and Van Ginkel. He was really helpful. And now he is a free agent. I don't think he'd be super expensive to come back, and I don't see why he wouldn't want to come back to this team, and Brian Flores, the fit. Overall, this is not a huge need. As long as you bring back Pat Jones, Gabriel Murphy can be a nice sub-package guy as well to keep an eye out on. Overall, not a huge need going into the free agency and draft as long as you keep Pat Jones. They've got their rotation of 4 or 5 guys. Let's go on to the linebacking core, and it is a solid linebacking core. Blake Cashman's earned that contract. Ivan Pace has been a really dynamic blitzer for them and run defender. So between these two guys, you got your starters. Now Pace, of course, I think the coverage element is still coming along with him. Cashman, though, has been all around their stud. He's been their green dot guy. Him and Harrison Phillips really are kind of like leaders right now, and in terms of getting that alignment going, but Cashman been really, really good. Asamoah hasn't come along, unfortunately. You got Hill as some depth. He can also kick if he needs to, but Asamoah, gonna still want to see him step up a little bit more. So I would just recommend, if you don't bring back Hill, which I don't know if they're going to, I would just bring in a little bit of depth here. But besides that, you got Pace, you got Cashman. Those are your 2 studs in the room. They're in a really good spot there with your starters. Just need a little bit of depth, possibly. On to the cornerback room, and it all starts with Byron Murphy, another great pickup by KAM. And he has just fit right into glove with Brian Flores in that defense. Had a Pro Bowl season and very, very good player. He is just somebody that is going to be a tough decision because he's a free agent. Do you give him that money? He's going to get upwards of close to $20 million. That's really the only discussion. It's not whether or not he's a great player. And I mean, ideally, you want him back. That's just going to be the key thing. He gives you versatility. He played a lot in the slot, too, for them. Remember, Josh Martellus can play safety, plays in the slot, plays in the box. He's a hybrid linebacker. He's like a do-it-all, jack-of-all-trades man. Now, he is a free agent next year, too, so something to keep an eye on is Josh Martellus. Now, Jay Ward could also play a little bit of that. We'll talk about him, too, when we get into the safety positions. He's not listed here. They've got some guys who have a lot of versatility in their game. But Josh Martellus, I have listed here as a slot corner. But as I talk about, he also plays in the safety room for them and gives you that 3-way versatility. They play 3 safeties as much as any team in the NFL. But Byron Murphy on dime packages and stuff, he can kick inside in the slot. And then Shaq Griffin and Stephon Gilmore can play on the outsides. Fabian Monroe. And when Mekhi Blockman comes back next year from injury, he's another guy to watch out for in this room. And you got Dwight McGlothern, another dude that maybe, find a little bit of upside there. I like him coming to Arkansas. So you got some young guys with Blockman and McGlothern. Maybe one of those guys can step up. I mean, we can't completely rely on that. You got a lot of free agent decisions to be made as well. The KAM's going to have to get back into this room and really figure this thing out again, because it is, just like last year, going to be very much in flux. Draft pick, free agency, those are all in play for this team this offseason, depending on what they do with Byron Murphy especially. That leads us into the safety room. I want to start off by saying Harrison Smith, if this is his final, if this is his last hurrah, what a great career. I've always admired Harrison Smith. Back when I used to play Mud and Madden, I would always hey, got to get Harrison Smith. I love this guy. He's not the fastest guy or anything like that, but he just understands football. He's one of the smartest guys out there. He's still a good football player, even though he has some limitations with speed. I mean, it's always had a little bit of limitations with some speed. It obviously is catching up a little bit, but again, he's one of the smartest guys out there. The development he's helped out with Cameron Bynum. Theo Jackson, I've heard tons of great things about him, maybe being the long-term replacement for Harrison Smith. I would love to see Harrison Smith go for it one more year. Come on, Harrison, give us a couple more seasons. You still got it. But that is something he's definitely earned the right to after 13 great seasons. We'll see what he ends up doing. Now, I am projecting that he comes back for this. Things will change. If he does end up retiring, as we talked about, maybe Theo Jackson end up staying into that role. Jay Ward's another guy. They spent, a 4th-round pick on him. He can compete for that spot as well. Josh Martellus obviously gives you versatility in and out. So between all those guys, I'm not going to go crazy at it in the draft. It's going to be something we'll see when that announcement comes with Harrison Smith, whether he wants to play or not. That could just be more of a free agency thing too. They could pick up somebody on the cheap to get a little bit of depth. And that's what I'm going to do. I'll bring in a veteran free agent to be able to bring in some depth. My priority here, though, is bringing back Cameron Bynum. He has been a really good football player for this team. He's another guy that's a leader. He's not just great at celebrations. He's also a good football player. He's that rangy free safety. I mean, he's not the most athletic guy, but just like Harrison Smith, he has a very, very good mental processor. He understands the game of football, and he's come such a long way and just outperformed every expectation of him. So keeping him around, keeping your core guys, that's really, really important. Let's get into the free agency strategy, where this is where it all begins, especially for the Vikings that don't have a whole ton of draft capital this season. Trading down is going to be huge. If they can do that, if KM can pull that, that's going to be a big swing for them. Starting with the team cuts, I'm not cutting anybody. I don't really think that they need to. Brendel maybe is a possibility for them, depending on who they bring in a free agency. Overall, I'd still keep him as a swingman. I'm cool with that. Now, cap-wise, they're in a really good spot. They have $63 million. Now, that's not effective cap space. After draft picks and restricted guys, it's more like 55 to 57. But no matter what, they still have some of the more amount of effective cap space in the NFL. With that all being said, I'm still going to restructure Justin Jefferson, save a little bit of money. That saves us $18 million. $24 million is going to be restructured. We obviously know Jetta is going to be around for the long haul. So keeping him with a little bit of restructure here, give him some money up front, get us a little bit more cap space to work with is going to be a win-win scenario. The team re-signs now, and starting off with the quarterback position, Sam Darnold, I'm going to go ahead and let him go. I think he's going to get paid and wish him the best. Nick Mullins, I'm going to let him go too. He's a solid backup. I could see them bringing him back. Maybe he gets a little bit more money than I was willing to offer, so that's why I let him go. I'm prioritizing bringing Daniel Jones back. He can be the bridge quarterback next season. Give McCarthy that time that he needs to get fully healthy and go from there. Even if he has to start play the whole season, I'm cool with that. $10 million, I know it's a lot of money. At the same time, though, quarterbacks are important. No matter what, a good backup quarterback is going to cost $5 million anyway. So if you look at it that way, $5 to $8 million is a good backup quarterback range that you're going to see out there. So $10 million is a plus level, but I still think it's worth it. Then you go to the running back position. Aaron Jones, Cam Akers, bring both of those guys back. I'm giving Aaron Jones a little bit of a pay boost from $7 million last year to up to $8 million. I think he's definitely worth that. Keep him incentivized. He's a good football player. And Cam Akers as well, nice rotational guy with Aaron Jones. We'll certainly be looking at that as well in the draft or free agency. We'll see in a minute. And then wide receiver, tight end wise, letting those guys go. Solid players, but I think, they can go maybe a little bit cheaper. We can go a little cheaper between free agency and the draft. Dalton Risner on the interior is the one guy with David Quisenberry. I'm bringing both of those dudes back. Quisenberry will be a swing tackle. Dalton Risner, let him start at left guard, or at least compete with Blake Brendel at that left guard position. I think as long as the price is right with Risner, I'm cool bringing him back. He's a solid pass protector. And yes, he's not the greatest run blocking guy. I'm okay with that. He's a really reliable pass protector, and he's, relatively been available through his career. I know he's banged up a little bit this season. However, in general, he's been a reliable player. On the defense side of the ball, Pat Jones, Jihad Ward, I want to bring both of those guys back. Both good rotational players on their defense line. Pat Jones is going to be the more expensive of the two, $4 million. I think he's totally worth that, though. And then on the interior, I did let go of Jerry Tillery, but I did decide to bring back Jonathan Bullard. Good early run defender, and keep him in his rotation. He won't be super expensive. So keep him in 1 year, $2 million range. Totally fine with that. And then we go on to the secondary. I do let go of Hill as the linebacker. We can find a little bit cheaper option, I feel like. And then in the secondary, I let go of Gilmore and Griffin, but I did bring back Byron Murphy. I let go of Monroe too. Maybe they bring back one of those veterans. I could see that. I have some other plans here in mind, so we'll keep it that. Well, I'll play it by ear on that here in a second. But Byron Murphy, I decided to bring him back. That continuity is really, really important. And yes, it's a big deal. 3 years, $54 million. 18 average, just under 20 million, and it's going to be 13 million on the cap year one. They always do the lower cap hits and they get progressively bigger, and that's what I try to replicate that and keep some realism with it. Anyway, Byron Murphy, going to keep him around as good as he was this season. I want to keep that continuity in town. And then final guy that I want to bring back is Cameron Bynum. 3 years, $45 million, 15 average, 9 first year. Just got to keep him back. I know it's a little bit expensive. Maybe he doesn't get that. I always try to overproduce rather than under, right? So maybe he'll be a little cheaper than that when it actually is all said and done. If they do let go Cameron Bynum, watch out for Javon Holland. Obviously, with that experience, him and Brian Flores, that could be somebody. And of course, maybe if Harrison ends up retiring, I don't think they would sign both of those guys to those type of big deals. That would be a lot of money towards safeties. But if they lose Bynum, then I could see them going after a Javon Holland. That would make sense. So one of those guys, but personally, just go ahead and bring Bynum back. I think that makes a lot of sense. Keeping your core players is ever important. The outside free agent signings now start off Ben Skoranek, Tyler Davis. Going to be some much needed depth on their offense and just good blockers. Skoranek gives you inside-out versatility. Davis just be, like I said, a nice number 3 tight end. Here's our big signing on offense, James Daniel. He's going to come over from Pittsburgh. Yeah, he's coming off a major injury, but he is a very good interior offensive lineman. Plug him in right away at that right guard position. He should be good to go by training camp as well. Yes, coming off an injury is always tricky to project with that cap and all those things, but I think you can find a nice deal on him. A very good football player and going to be an immediate upgrade at that right guard position for them. 2 years, $18 million, 9 average, 7 that first year. Then we go into the defense side of the ball. Denetric Wise Jr. definitely has some nuance with Brian Flores. They know each other going back to his freshman season, or his rookie season, should I say freshman season, rookie season with the New England Patriots. And he had his best 2 years really under Brian Flores. I mean, he had some good seasons along the way. He really is coming off a down year for the New England Patriots, and that defense in general kind of struggled, losing some players like Barmore. But I think it gives you the opportunity to get a guy with that familiarity with Flores, and then also as a good situational pass rusher, and that leads the way to be able to draft a guy and be able to develop somebody too. And we're going to bring in Ty Summers from the Giants. He's a good special teamer, and he's a nice rotational linebacker. So he can be a guy that can be a core special teamer as well for the Minnesota Vikings here and give you some depth for injuries. Then Brandon Stevens. Maybe, hey, look, they hit on last year going out and getting Byron Murphy. Maybe we can do a little bit of the same with Brandon Stevens coming off a down year for the Baltimore Ravens. Give him a prove-it deal. 1 year, $4 million. It certainly doesn't hurt. He gives you a little bit of ability off like with some size at that cornerback position. And then finally, get MJ Stewart, just a little bit more depth here at that safety position. That's really what this is. He also has versatility play in the slot and up top. So, and then finally, last but least, I count $3 million for their draft picks. They don't have a whole ton of draft picks, but that is what it is. $3 million. Talk about the needs real quick, one more time, starting with the offense side of the ball. To me, finding another running back might be one of the top priorities for me. Akers and Jones are under contract for us for one more season, but that's just what it is. 1 year deals. I do want to add some more depth too, because as we saw as the season went along, Aaron Jones, I think, got a little bit more run down. So I want to make sure we keep him fresh through the season so we can have him at the important times of the year, especially too. So getting a guy in here like round 3 through round 5, one of those draft picks, I think that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of depth in this class too, and you can find a really good running back in that range. Wide receiver, also try to find a little bit of depth. That's more of a 5th round pick to me. I don't think they need to spend a 1st or 3rd round pick at all on that. You got your 2 studs. You just need a little bit of depth. So that's really what I'm going to be looking at there. Offensive line wise, I feel good about that interior now. Now, I do want to look at a center still. I know Michael Juergens, he could be a guard or a center for them. So I like that versatility that he brings to the table. But I still think they need to get somebody for Bradbury long haul, or at least add some sort of competition in there with him, because that is a huge need. I would like to upgrade at some point, and as I talked about, he's going into a contract year, so they need to start thinking about the future at that center position. Guard-wise, Reisner, Daniels, I feel really good about that. You got Ingram and Brendel as swing guys. Quisenberry's your swing tackle. You get your 2 starters there with Darisaw and O'Neal. Their offensive line, though, looking better, in my opinion, going. You can at least start with this offensive line. On to the defense side of the ball. My main priority here is interior of the defense line. They need to bolster this up. So I will be looking at doing that as a major priority for me early in this draft. I think this is a 1st, at latest 3rd round pick, but especially in this draft class and where the options were since I went free agency wise for corner, spending a little bit more money there, I think we lead towards the interior as we go into the draft. We got Denetric Wise, you got Jihad Campbell, nice rotational pass rushers, but we need a true stud for the long haul, a 3-tech that we can develop and be the future there. And as I talk about, you got Walter Nolan, Derek Hall, Tyleek Williams. Like, you got some stars potentially. Kenneth Grant. I mean, Kenneth Grant's probably more of a nose guy, 1-tech. Same thing with Tyleek Williams, but there are definitely some pass rushers. TJ Sanders, you could get him in a trade down. So I love those options potentially, as well as you could trade down to the top of the 2nd round and get one of those guys. And that would be a really good option for them too. Cornerback wise, You could, of course, add somebody here. I mean, if Benjamin Morrison's available, I would take him. Even with the injury, I know you're saying, oh, no, not an injury corner for the Vikings. Andrew Booth was raw coming out, and he also had the injury flag. Morrison's a beast. He just has the injury flag. So I would consider Morrison 100% if he's on the board. Besides that, though, I feel good about this going into the next season with Murphy, Stevens, Metellus. You got Blockman coming back from injury. McLaughlin, another, young guy that could develop. So there are, 5-6 corners, Ambry Thomas as well, that they can roll into next season. Linebacker should be okay. Maybe pick up a UDFA there or, a cheap free agent before training camp. Lastly, safety-wise, hopefully should be good. And as I talked about, I'm projecting Harrison Smith to come back. If he doesn't come back, we'll have to rehab this conversation, open back up again. But you got guys like Theo Jackson as a lot of hype there as a guy that could keep, end up being that long-term starter for them. But we did bring in MJ Stewart to at least give them some depth. Time for the draft, though. And with the first pick, I'm going Derek Harmon, the interior pass rusher from Oregon. He's going to be a perfect scheme fit in my eyes, is that penetrating 3-tech for them in a 3-4 odd front. I have no problem him playing in a even or an odd front. He's very strong at the point of attack. He has exceptional get off and quickness. He's not the most twitched up guy, but with his size profile and his quickness, he's going to be a problem for offensive linemen to deal with. He's powerful and he's quick. That's a recipe for success. And in Flores, and you talk about what Oregon did a lot too, is a lot of stunts and gains to get pressure on quarterbacks. So, and you talk about Brian Flores, he does plenty of that. So Derek Harmon is going to come right into that defense line. I think he can be a easy 300 snap guy in his career as a rookie, get this thing going, and be a really, really nice impact for this defensive line. To round number 3, I'm going RJ Harvey, UCF running back. This guy's got a good story. And man, if you're going to talk about, you're going to hear a lot of Bucky Irving comps. If there's any Bucky Irving comp that I'm willing to give out this offseason, it's RJ Harvey. He's got that same wiggle to his game, make you miss. He's tough to tackle for his size. And man, does he have some explosive burst, man. Oh my gosh. And even when he was running, Travis Hunter, it took him a minute to catch up. So he's got legit 4.4 speed, I feel like. RJ Harvey is no slouch when it comes to his speed, but I love his shake and bake. He makes dudes miss, and that's going to translate to the next level. He's going to be a great number 3 running back early on with Akers and Aaron Jones, but he will be that long-term starter for them in this team. He's also a nice receiving back, too. He definitely has ability to be a good receiving element for this team as well. He'll get a major upgrade on that interior at the center position. Now, I talked about Michael Juergens, and he's definitely got to keep an eye out on. He gives you guard center versatility, and I'm fine with that. Majors is going to be another add to this interior. Get some more help on that interior for the long haul. Majors can be the center for this team. With Bradbury going into that contract year, Majors is much stronger, I feel like, than Bradbury is. And he's still a really solid athlete. I don't think he's as good of an athlete as Bradbury, but he's a solid athlete, can do zone blocks. He can do gap blocks. Like, he's very versatile in that regard. And they're more of a zone team. But with that being said, like, Majors isn't limited to one or the other. I think he's a very scheme-diverse guy. And he shows the ability to anchor. And that is definitely something Vikings fans, I think, are going to be looking for. He's got some work to do. I think his hand placement's still coming along, but it's getting there. And I think he's a guy that you take a chance on. On to our final pick of our draft here. Efton Chesum from Eastern Washington. Going way out here with this final one. He's been a standout in the East-West Shrine Bowl. Now, maybe he isn't the exact fit of like a more of a downfield attacking style that they like to do. Kevin O'Connell's very, very good at that, but they could also use a guy like Chisholm who will be more of just a slot-only type of dude that will at least compete with Jalen Naylor in the slot position, give them some more depth, because he probably is more of a only slot guy, which is fine for me. He really excels on those quick outs, like talk about the whips and stuff like that. And with the way he has that lateral agility and that size profile too, he's strong enough where he can work through press, work through some of those linebackers. And when you're a slot player, you got to be able to do that. So he's going to really help them out in that department. And as I talked about, just at least give them a little bit of depth with a lot of, they don't have really a whole ton of guys under contract after the season besides Addison and Jefferson. I know it's not the longest draft, but hopefully we were able to address some of the needs here and between free agency and the draft, fill a lot of those areas. Between the offensive line, improving the interior with James Daniel, Dalton Reisner back, you now have Blake Brendel and Ed Ingram as depth guys. And then for the future, we got Jake Majors, Michael Juergens. Those are guys that are going to be competing for that center spot / guard spot. Garrett Bradley going to a contract year. I doubt they end up paying him again. So Majors, Juergens, one of those guys wins up the job. And I could talk about Jurgens could end up being the long-term guard for them too if he ends up working out on that interior. Just get your best offensive lineman out there. I want to continue to invest on that interior because it's been such a weakness for so long. Other draft picks, though, we got Efton Chisholm as some more depth at the receiver position, and RJ Harvey, who might be the biggest impact that we get in terms of the draft for them right away. RJ Harvey, get him in a rotation, just like Bucky Irvin. I think he'll get going as the season progresses, and that way as the season progresses too, Aaron Jones doesn't have to be leaned on so much. You can keep him fresh for the playoffs when it really matters. Cam Akers is going to be a rotation. We brought him back too. So Harvey, Akers, Jones, that's a great rotation of 3, and then Ty Chandler too. And then on the defense side of the ball, yeah, we didn't spend a ton of draft capital here. We only spent our first round pick on it, but we did spend our first round pick on it. So we're getting a major upgrade with Derek Harmon on that interior of the defensive line. I really like his game. As a Ducks fan, he was so good getting after the quarterback with that quick first step that he has, and he's very powerful too. So he's not just going to be a 3-tech like that, is just a pass rushing specialist. He's going to be a every down. He can be a good run defender. He is a good run defender, most notably versus the Quinshon Judkins strip where he got him right in the backfield quick on Donovan Jackson. Anyway, he's going to be a really nice rotational player early on, long-term starter for them. We got Denetric Wise as well. Jihad Ward is back as a rotational player. So you got Redmond, Bullard as rotational run defenders early on. Phillips, obviously, is your starting nose and hybrid shade there. He's going to be back at least for 2 more seasons, still under contract. Just continuing to bolster that interior defense line, make that even better with now your 3-tech of the future. Now, free agency-wise is where we spent and looked at the cornerback position. You got Brandon Stevens on a 1-year prove-it scenario. Byron Murphy back on that big contract extension. So those are our 2 outside corners. Obviously, Murphy can play on the inside, but with Blockman coming back, you got McLaughlin. Maybe you have to still bring somebody else in. I could get the little tendency there to say, well, did we do enough? Because Murphy, like I talk about, can kick on the inside. Who's going to be the other outside corner? Maybe you bring back Shaq Griffin. I would definitely be open to that, but I wouldn't say you bring him back right away. I think he's a guy that you look at maybe before the draft, you keep him on hold, say, hey, look, we're keeping you as a relationship there, but maybe after the draft, we bring you back with some extra money or whatever. Like that's what I would be open to there is bringing a veteran after the draft. You go into a BPA approach, see who's on the board. If a Morrison falls or a Siobhan Revel, those are guys that I would definitely consider with their pick, depending on the interior players as well. So those are all things I keep in mind when you go into this. We can also sign somebody else in free agency as well to fill some of those spots. And then besides that, though, we didn't really do a whole ton draft-wise like I talked about. We just spent 1 pick on the defense. We got some more help depth-wise with linebacker and safety. So that's going to do it here for the Minnesota Vikings. Skull. I hope you guys have a really good day. Let me know what you think. Agree or disagree. What would you do differently? Keep it cool, though. I'll talk to you here later.